Jacques Chirac famously admitted France couldn't survive without Africa. Now, that statement is proving tragically accurate as the Sahel's rejection of French influence triggers a devastating economic crisis in France itself. France's deep involvement in Africa, particularly the Sahel region, is a complex tapestry woven from historical ties, economic dependencies, and political ambitions. As former French President Jacques Chirac himself acknowledged, Africa has played a crucial role in maintaining France's economic standing. However, recent events, including France's expulsion from Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, signal a dramatic shift in this dynamic, leaving France facing significant financial and political setbacks. The impact of these expulsions is perhaps most visible in the struggles of Air France. The airline, which for decades enjoyed a near monopoly on air travel in the region, has suffered staggering losses after being barred from these three countries. The financial implications are substantial. Before the recent political upheavals, Air France generated massive profits, with flights to and from Mali bringing in 500 million CFA francs daily, while Niger and Burkina Faso contributed 430 million and 390 million CFA francs respectively. This amounted to over 2 million euros in daily revenue from just one airline. The loss of this revenue stream is a significant blow to Air France and a symptom of a much deeper problem for the French economy. The rise of military leadership in these Sahel nations marked a turning point. These new leaders made it clear that the era of France profiting from their resources while maintaining a stranglehold on their economies was over. French troops were asked to leave, major corporations were forced out, and the political influence France had long wielded was swiftly dismantled. For Air France, this meant an immediate and painful financial hit. For the broader French economy, it signaled the beginning of a major reckoning. France, desperate to regain access to the region, has been scrambling to negotiate a way back into the Sahel. However, the new governments in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger remain steadfast in their stance. There will be no return to the old system of exploitation. These leaders understand that France's global influence has long been bolstered by wealth extracted from Africa. By severing these economic pipelines, they are forcing France to confront its declining power. This shift represents more than just financial losses for French corporations. It signals the unraveling of a system that allowed France to dominate the region for decades. With the Sahel now asserting its independence, France is being forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. Its economic survival is no longer guaranteed by its former colonies. For decades, France cultivated an image of industrial power and economic strength. However, beneath the surface, much of its wealth derived from resources it never actually owned. Despite lacking significant reserves of gold, uranium, and other critical minerals, France managed to position itself as a major exporter of these commodities. The truth, however, was simple. These resources were not French, they were African. By controlling the mines and supply chains in its former colonies, France funneled vast amounts of wealth into its economy, leaving African nations with only a fraction of the profits. This hidden dependency was publicly exposed when Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, called out France on live television, revealing how much of its so-called exports were actually resources stripped from African countries. France's reliance on Africa extended beyond gold to include some of the most essential minerals of the modern world: uranium, cobalt, and lithium. These minerals are vital for producing batteries, electric vehicles, and advanced technology. France, lacking significant reserves of these minerals within its own borders, still managed to play a dominant role in the global high-tech industry. Thanks to its deep-rooted control over African mining sectors, particularly in the Sahel, the rejection of French influence by Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali was not just about sovereignty. It was a direct challenge to the economic system that had kept them dependent on Paris for decades. A wave of military-led takeovers dismantled pro-French governments, signaling a shift that sent shockwaves through France's economic and political establishment. Paris responded with anger, imposing sanctions, cutting diplomatic ties, and attempting to isolate these nations on the international stage. But instead of submitting to pressure, the new leadership doubled down. French troops were expelled, embassies were shut down, and industries that had long been under French corporate control were seized and nationalized. In a matter of months, France lost its grip on the region, and with it, the vast resources that had quietly fueled its economy for years. The forced exit of Air France from the Sahel is a prime example of this shift. For years, the airline was more than just a transportation service. It was an economic stronghold that allowed France to dominate African air travel while ensuring that billions in revenue flowed straight back to Paris. With a near monopoly on flights between the Sahel and Europe, Air France controlled pricing, dictated routes, and kept fares artificially high, all while offering services that were often inferior to other international carriers. African nations saw little benefit, as profits were funneled back into French corporate hands, reinforcing economic dependence rather than fostering local growth. The new leaders in the Sahel questioned why a foreign airline had such unchecked influence while offering so little in return. When Air France abruptly suspended flights in response to political shifts, they responded by permanently shutting the airline out and exploring alternative partnerships with other global carriers. Mali's foreign minister, Abdoulaye Diop, criticized Air France's exploitative business practices, pointing out how the airline frequently canceled flights at will, leaving African passengers stranded in Europe with no accountability. He argued that such actions would never be tolerated in the US or elsewhere in the West. Yet Air France operated in Africa as if it had free rein. That era, he declared, was over. If Air France ever wanted to return, it would have to do so like any other airline, without privilege, without special treatment, and certainly without the dominance it once enjoyed. France's entire economic model in Africa relied on controlling key industries, from mining to transportation. The Sahel's decision to shut out French corporations is more than an inconvenience. It's a full-scale dismantling of the economic grip France has maintained for decades. Nowhere has this collapse been more devastating than in Niger, a country that played a vital role in keeping France's lights on literally for over half a century. Niger's uranium fueled France's nuclear power plants, providing over 70% of the country's electricity through French energy giant Orano, formerly Areva. Before the 2023 coup, Niger supplied nearly 35% of France's uranium at dirt cheap prices, with the country itself receiving only about 5% of the profits, while France reaped the rewards. When Niger's new government took power, one of its first major decisions was to halt uranium exports to France, accusing Orano of looting the country's resources while leaving its people in poverty. The consequences for France were immediate and severe. With its cheapest and most reliable source of uranium suddenly cut off, French nuclear plants were thrown into crisis mode, scrambling to secure alternative supplies from Canada and Kazakhstan at significantly higher costs. Orano's mining operations in Niger ground to a halt, leading to billions of euros in projected losses, while France faced an energy crisis that threatened both its economy and national security. Without Niger's uranium, France's nuclear power industry, once the backbone of its energy strategy, was left vulnerable, forcing the country to reckon with a future where its dominance over African resources was no longer guaranteed. Niger is ensuring that France never regains control over its uranium supply by striking new deals with Russia and China. The country has ended France's decades-long monopoly over its most valuable resource. This shift marks a turning point not just for Niger, but for the entire Sahel region. For years, France extracted gold, lithium, coltan, and other valuable minerals from West Africa while giving little in return. These resources powered French industries, fueled technological advancements, and kept its economy running smoothly. But with the rise of new leadership in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, the days of foreign companies exploiting African wealth with minimal compensation are quickly coming to an end. These countries are now embracing a policy of resource nationalism, demanding fair deals that actually benefit their economies. French corporations, once deeply embedded in the region's mining sector, are being forced out as new governments prioritize partnerships with Russia, China, and other emerging powers. This has sent shockwaves through France's economy, as its once secure supply of African minerals is slipping away. One of the biggest industries feeling the heat is gold mining. Mali, the third largest gold producer in Africa, has expelled French-backed mining firms, replacing them with companies from Russia and China.